My name is Glenn. I'm a co-founder of GovBench here. Thank you so much to QTS data centers, the best data centers in the world, for being our great partner here for us. And yeah, the co-founder right here. We're going to be talking today a little bit. We'll keep this short, like 10, 15 minutes, about what we're doing here with GovBench, the reason why we're doing it. And yeah, we'll have a little bit of good time. We'll have like a short Q&A. We'll be around for the next hour if you guys have questions afterwards. So a little bit about me. I just left the Department of War, Department of Defense, whatever you want to call it now, it's up to you. I left a few months ago. Generative AI, I was technically for the Chief AI Office. My background, software turned AI engineer over the years, led engineering for the Defense Digital Service. But I'm a California boy, grew up out there, Southern California, Bay Area. So this is kind of a map of our brain dump of all the things going on with AI and national security. Obviously a lot. I'm sure you guys spent all day at GTC, NVIDIA GTC, talking about this, so apologies if we're regurgitating that. But all things from provisional authorizations, AI action plan, etc. So we're going to try to help you guys make sense of this. These slides will be available made public afterwards. An article that came out the other day, I thought it was pretty timely, this was yesterday. Military is extensively using DeepSeek. That's their kind of premier frontier model for their military. And this article kind of goes into depth of the degree in which they're doing that, with the amount of success. And so I think that kind of frames the work that we are doing and so passionate about, because we know credibly that this is an actual threat. This is no longer a hypothetical. And so to kind of make sense of all this, we're going to talk a little bit about this AI national security stack on the US side, all the way up, down from data centers to authorization, and the rules, regulations, and policies that really span all of that. It'd be kind of hard to follow. So on the new rules, the different regulations that are starting to come into effect, a little bit of a history lesson. We have rescinded the AI executive order from President Biden from 2023. What's remained untouched, the AI national security memo from President Biden around this time last year. It's actually surprised that was untouched. And now in this administration, we have things known as like the AI action plan, this thing called the anti-woke AI executive order. We've actually printed out different copies of these materials, and they're present on these tables if you guys want to give it a read later. And now the White House is petitioning for people to submit different AI regulations that they find to be overly onerous, so they can kind of take action on that. One of the things I think is going to be the most kind of prescient is this AI executive order from July, because it's going to kind of mandate that different AI companies or providers and vendors that they do certain things if they're going to be selling to the government. So really interesting stuff. At the bottom, we'll talk about data centers briefly. Classified data centers, that's where all these servers live and have water cooling and all sorts of craziness. For classified data centers, they have to comply with something known as ICD 705. Basically, it's this really, really, really long document that governs how these data centers are built. I'm not a data center guy, but we have a million of them here, so feel free to ask them. And what's interesting is like all these different government cloud companies will pay these data centers to deploy these really classified environments. They kind of take care of that for them. And the AI action plan, tying this back to this administration, is kind of heavily calling for renewed investment in standing up a lot of these government accredited data centers. On the compute side, I know it's NVIDIA week, so it's NVIDIA, but there's a lot of different compute that's coming online. From Grok, I don't know if Grok is here, from Google. These are companies, Google's, their TPUs, that's been around for a minute here, but they're starting to really make it into a lot of federal government applications and data centers and so forth. So it's been interesting to see how things are kind of diversifying. And in terms of compute locations, the AI inference, things that power different chatbots and whatnot, that happens in these government accredited clouds, it happens in these high performance computing centers. But one of the biggest issues that we're running into, and I saw this when I was on the inside, I led AI infrastructure for the Chief AI Officer. These government clouds really often lack compute. It's shocking. It is shocking how few GPUs there are in these government environments, and it's really becoming that big problem. On the acquisition front, we've seen that different AI companies have entered into contracts with the Pentagon. Some of them are here today with the Pentagon to do different things and experimentation. And we've seen these AI labs all, for the most part, make their chatbots available to the federal government at a super low cost in order to reduce that barrier to entry. So really really fascinating approaches that kind of creative approaches that we're seeing AI companies use to kind of diffuse their capabilities.
And on the validation side, so how are you even gaining these purchase decisions? How do you know these things work in the actual environments that we care about? A lot of that stack is on the evaluation side. So JC, which is the Center for AI Standards and Innovation, reports a bit of a report out for DeepSeek. And one of the key things that we're doing with GovBench is making sure that it's easy to create domain-specific evaluations that actually help inform people how to use these models in production in real-world settings. So our first foray to that is with StaffBench. So many of you know we've spent time in government. We have joint staff roles. J6 is key focus here. And how are the models assisting these joint staff roles in doing their day-to-day jobs? We kind of distill that into a eval, which is deployed across DoD and also many partners. And this is an older run. This helps us stratify and understand performance characteristics for the joint staff roles and actually serve as the North Star for the various wall developers to actually push performance on key areas and what we're measuring. And on the sector of new rules, we have lawful order bench, which is kind of understanding how the models are compliant with legal military orders and whether or not we actually deploy these in operational settings in combat, which is what the DoD is most focused on.
And last thing on the stack, in terms of authorization, these things are called provisional authorizations, basically the different mechanisms in which we're able to tap into the best models across different classification levels. That's come online for the most part over the past year. We've seen the things that regulate cybersecurity and applications in government environments. There's an AI overlay, basically instructions on how to bring in AI to these different frameworks, which is really helpful. And then the CIO of the DoD has largely streamlined the ATO process as of like a month ago. So a lot of great work in terms of like streamlining this really incredibly frustrating authorization process that every single person hates. So we'll briefly touch on our methodology. There's like a proof of concept of how to bring agents to secure government environments or secure government systems. So the idea here is we want to save employees time and frustration, fundamentally. And so we kind of simplified things, or maybe oversimplified things. Basically, I think it's important to be pragmatic. These government systems are not going to change anytime soon. Like, I've seen it on the inside. They operate in sprints of like 5 to 10 years. They don't change. And so you have to get a little bit creative in terms of how you can bring the latest AI, right, and to interface with it. So our approach is to replicate these government systems, create evaluations against it, and then eventually you're going to be able to get to that ability to deploy and actually authorize these agents to do all sorts of tasks for really annoying government systems. We're talking, imagine like, you guys know FAFSA, right? How awful that is, or like, different unemployment forms and whatnot. So the one that we decided to touch on is the defense travel system. If you've spent time in DoD, this is one of the most hated websites in the entire Department of Defense. I see nods, so I know I'm right. Basically, it's how people book any and all travel in the U.S. military. According to SimilarWeb, it has 432,000 visits, almost 80,000 hours per month, millions of dollars in man-hours spent just on booking travel, booking flights on the phone with the chatbot. It's just, oh my God, it's super frustrating. And so, we practice what we preach. We basically did the first step of our pipeline here, which is replicated DTS. We took the actual application, put it into the API that powers the application, and created what's known as the Model Context Protocol. I bet a lot of people were talking about that today at the conference, so that a chatbot, whether that's ChatGPT, whether that's Anthropic, or any chatbot, can interface with this really frustrating system. And so here was like the actual results. We were able to take, typically in the military, you might get orders from your boss that says, hey, you need to be in DC at these dates by this time, go book your travel, X, Y, how much is it going to cost? So instead of going through the traditional web portal, we're able to actually just put that in natural language into ChatGPT. It interfaces with the API that powers that website. And as you can see, creates just a much nicer user interface than the actual website. And what's fascinating is like for different consequential tasks, like booking flights or things that are actually going to cost money, it prompts you to actually confirm.
And we want to talk a little bit about the life cycle where we talk about benchmarks. What does that mean? Where does this sit in the stack? So benchmarks are not a product and all be all in and of itself. It should actually come from things we see in the field and combined with organizational KPIs, things we actually care about. Glenn touched on kind of creating replicas and environments. Benchmarks are just synthetic representations of that. So things that we talked about earlier is where that fits in. And then once you have baselines, things you can measure systematically, scientifically, we can then push this out into the consumers of this, ultimately, the Wall Street departments, other partners beyond. And that is something we want to kind of emphasize, that this is things that not only should external parties own, but also people who are actually making purchasing decisions, people who are actually operating and using these things. To actually, hey, we should create benchmarks, we should measure, we can't improve what we don't measure. And obviously, one of the things we want to do here with GovBench is also work on the education advocacy part of how to actually do this.
It was pretty cool earlier this year, a few months ago, we were able to throw a GovBench hackathon where we brought people from pretty much every government department or cabinet level department, people focused on tariffs and all sorts of really boring things that most people don't care about, but they care about because it's their job. And they're able to create evaluations of benchmarks to see hey, if we were to use ChatGPT at the IRS, how well would it perform, right? So 3 main takeaways from this talk. A lot of rules and regulations coming online. We think that the best way to mitigate the risk for those and to navigate those are by creating benchmarks. We don't want to monopolize benchmarks. We're just we're a nonprofit. We want to educate people to invest in their own benchmarks and create things. We're super excited for agents, AI agents and so forth. They're far out in terms of getting authorized, and that's okay. But we think that there's a lot of work that can be done today to start experimenting with it. Replicating systems are really frustrating, solving real pain points. And lastly, we really, really do not have enough compute in the places that matter. Lots of great efforts that exist to bring different compute clusters and whatnot, but where applications are built and so forth, that's really what's lacking. And so it's really frustrating. But anyways, that's pretty much it. We wanted to keep it short. I know we covered a lot here. These slides will be made available. If you guys have any questions, let us know. We can raise your hand right now. But yeah, also just come up to us. Thank you.